make sure everything's working. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Thank you for joining me again this week. This is the 107th instance of my weekly office hour address. And so, I've been changing my background, my virtual background to start our meetings every week. And this week's background is actually a mural from Berlin. So this is one of the many travels that my wife and I have went on during our travels around the world. And so, yeah, this was an interesting happy dog that we saw on our travels, and I guess it's about 10 years ago now was the last time that we were in Germany, in Berlin. So hope you enjoyed that. We'll go ahead and go to our normal meeting, but thank you for joining me again this week. Happy April Fool's Day. Be on guard for we'll say outrageous jokes today. And what if you see something that seems a little out of whack? It probably is for a good reason. I hope everyone is healthy and enjoying the nice spring weather. We're now this 107th week makes it 746 days since the March 16th, 2020 county health order started the shelter in place in an attempt to slow the spread of COVID-19. And just over 2 years ago, I converted my weekly coffee shop hours at Bean Scene to this weekly live stream address, and I haven't missed a week since. And people still say they enjoy hearing from their mayor each week, whether or not they watch this address live or delayed sometime over the next week. But it really is good because it allows me to take stock of the last 2 weeks, give you some updates and some news, answer some of your questions, and just provide some general words of encouragement. So thank you for allowing me to continue to represent you and work for Sunnyvale during interesting times. I normally follow up these live stream addresses with in-person meetings on Murphy Avenue. So if you want to reserve a time slot, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, you can email me. I actually won't be there this morning. After this meeting, I'm actually heading to another morning conference with elected officials. So I will be there this afternoon. If you happen to drop by, I'll be on Murphy Avenue at that point. So drop by if you see me. And over 6 months ago, I actually began changing my background art every week. And so this is art provided by the Sunnyvale Art Club artists. Today's piece is called California Dreaming. And it is by Tanushri Mathur. So California Dreaming by Tanushri Mathur. And so if you want to purchase this art or get in contact with the artist on other art that they might have, just contact me and I'll forward that information along. Let's go ahead and talk about what's happened at the federal, state, county, and city level over the last 2 weeks. 2 weekends ago, of course, was the opening of the Ace Hardware. And I don't know if people have had a chance to visit it, but happy to see it take the place of the old Walgreens right along El Camino at Maria near Wolf Road. And so, they're still kind of figuring out how to fill the store. It's actually one of the bigger Ace Hardwares. It's over 10,000 square feet. They have their soft opening, and their grand opening will happen sometime in the next month or two. But definitely go by, say hello, take a look around the store. I've already heard some good things of people that are happy to have more shopping options here in Sunnyvale. And then last Tuesday evening, City Council met, and we had a busy evening. We had started off with several orders of the day, Arbor Day, which is March 7th, which we're actually celebrating later this month, and we'll be talking about that later. March was, of course, American Red Cross Month, so hopefully you've given blood if you're able to. And of course, it was Women's History Month, so good to celebrate, those critical things, and especially, from a Women's History Month, the contributions and the sacrifices so many women in, Sunnyvale, in the nation, in the world have made. And let's see, as far as the main meeting is concerned, we went through several things, but we approved the request for funding for $170,000 to support a Work First program. So this was for Sunnyvale Community Services. It's a partnership between Sunnyvale Community Services and the Downtown Streets team to, get some of our unhoused community, give them jobs, get them back into the workforce, give them appropriate training, and just getting into that regularity of going to work every day. And so SCS, Sunnyvale Community Services, had lost some HUD funding after, this program has been going on for about 8 years now. And it's went through multiple, reviews and audits. And all of a sudden, the latest auditor said that some portion of the program wasn't meeting their requirements. And so in order to keep the program going until the end of this year, until the end of the fiscal year in July, we actually, SCS needed additional funds, and I was happy that the council unanimously approved those funds to kind of continue that program. We also, another big thing that we did was received a study issue report on looking at locations for cricket batting cages in Sunnyvale parks. And so this was a study issue that we sponsored several years ago. We did appropriate community outreach, evaluation, looking at what other cities did, and then finally decided upon 6 parks as kind of the prioritized list. The most important one, of course, is Ortega Park. Ortega is where there is quite a bit of cricket already happening. So looking at batting cages there, but as well as De Anza Park, Fair Oaks Park, Lakewood Park, Rayner Park, and Sarah Park. And so ultimately it's figuring out what the best use is of that land. And then it's starting to work with local groups to actually build those cages, raise the funds to build those cages where they're needed. So, much like we did many years ago for the batting cages for the Little League at several of our parks, those were actually funded by the Little Leagues themselves. And so they actually went through that process of building them and getting them added to our Sunnyvale parks. And we're also looking for grants and other funding options, but it's an important step for a council to do that first approval, and then moving forward to looking at doing other from an operation standpoint, what are we going to do to actually build them and where are they going to build them? And lastly, of course, we had a long discussion on returning to in-person meetings. And, as much as kind of COVID, the emergency hasn't fully ended yet, but there was a lot of discussions on conceivably going back to a hybrid model. And we've already given direction that whatever we do, we'll go back to hybrid. But the question is when. And so from our standpoint, we discussed it, and one of the big things was the city attorney was considering that the only valid way to do that would be if council went back in person, all of our boards and commissions would also immediately have to go back in person. And we weren't ready for that. There was some hesitation on some of the commissioner members' concept to go back to hybrid meetings immediately. And so we decided to delay that for a while. My guess is it'll be at least May before we actually decide to go back to in person. Ultimately, the county supervisors, and there's been a few cities around the county that have actually went to in-person meetings, but the county supervisors themselves haven't made that move. And so that's one of the things, since we're following the county health rules, that's one of the things that we actually want to be taking a look at. And then, of course, last Wednesday, Governor Newsom unveiled the proposal for $11 billion in relief for Californians related to the gas taxes. And so, the form of that relief has kind of been discussed, and it's a little controversial to some degree, but ultimately, registered vehicle owners would be eligible for up to $400 for each vehicle that they owned, up to 2 vehicles per person, so up to $800 per person. The proposal would also include electric vehicles, which is a little odd if you're trying to look at the gas tax and the prices of gas, but it would also provide about $750 million in grants to allow transit agencies to provide free rides to all riders for 3 months. And I think that's a big change. And I do think that that has a lot of value because people have become hesitant to take public transportation since COVID began. And I think there's always that concept that people are just not sure if utilizing public transportation is actually a viable option. And so, providing free transit for 3 months, I think would be a very positive thing to do. There's also, $1 billion in funding for pausing increases to gas and to tax increases in the gasoline tax, as well as a portion of the diesel fuel sales tax. But it also does $500 million to biking and walking focused transportation projects and about $1.75 billion to promote zero emission passenger vehicles and charging and adding to our charging infrastructure. So all those things are good. There's several counter proposals from the state legislature standpoint. So we'll see how quickly that actually moves forward as far as that's concerned. But it's good to see, people are still being hit by the price of gas, and hopefully the governor of the state legislature can do something about that. And then last Saturday, there was actually a Sister City event in Braley Park, and it was a celebration of the cherry blossoms that are in bloom right now. And it's not just Braley Park, but the cherry orchard right next to the tennis courts are in bloom. So if you enjoy seeing the cherry blossoms, this is a great time to do that. We'll actually be adding additional cherry trees in Braley Park, sponsored by our sister city, Isuka, Japan, later this month. And so from that standpoint, it's good to be out and celebrating nature. It was good to have a lot of the sister city families there that'll be going, a lot of the kids and some of the parents will be going back in June. And so hopefully, it was good to just enjoy the outside, enjoy the weather. And it should be another beautiful weekend this weekend. So if you get a chance, visit Braley Park, where there's already, I think, over 20 trees that have been donated by our sister city in the past. And they're in bloom right now, and a beautiful time to see that. Let's see, on Monday of this week, I and several council members hosted Congressman Khanna as he visited Columbia Middle School. And his visit was to mainly highlight more than $800,000 in federal funding for pedestrian and safe routes to school improvements at 2 intersections on Borregas near Columbia Middle School, and as well as another intersection right near Braley Elementary. And this is for basically high visibility crosswalks, so the flashing in the street crosswalks, as well as a few of the intersections had flashing, let's say, shoulder height signs as well. So trying to make it safer for kids going to school. And I appreciate, having more discussions with Congressman Khanna about getting, future funding for different projects within the city. But it was always good to have him, here in the city, and being able to get some of those grants and some of those funds that we really need. There's tons of things that we'd like to do, but it's all limited by the city budget, and making sure that we continue to provide services, continue to pay our employees accordingly. And some of those projects, I think if we wanted to do all the active transportation plan projects in the city, I think it's over $250 million to do all the different bike infrastructure and pedestrian curb cuts that we'd actually like to do. So this was good. That's one of the reasons why I go to DC and talk to our state and federal legislatures and our representatives to see what they can do to get additional funding for our city. And then on Tuesday of this week, Governor Newsom ordered water suppliers across California to step up their efforts on local drought response. He fell short of actually requiring water rationing or setting statewide conservation targets. So, there were a lot of people saying it's not time to wait; it's time to do that. And there's a lot of experts saying there needs to be a strong mandate to have appropriate conservation measures and not just leave it up to the urban water providers and wholesalers that are pushing for reduced usage as far as that's concerned. It doesn't really affect agricultural water providers or small water systems that are especially vulnerable to drought. And so I think we will be seeing sterner measures by June, but he basically Newsom ordered state water regulators to consider banning irrigation of decorative lawns at businesses and other institutions. And then, California water watchers really said that, the order wasn't enough, but the mandate also directed to curb outdoor water use by banning non-functional turf or water. So there are people who actually water their artificial turf, so that will ultimately stop. But the order actually did require emergency regulations that are expected to take effect in mid-June, unless local water suppliers act as if their water supplies have dipped by at least 10 to 20%. So it's kind of setting that expectation that in June, those water requirements or those water supplies will be at 10 or 20% of what the requirements would be. So a 10 to 20% reduction. And, we've had one of the lowest, we have one of the lowest years in the last 70 years of checking our how much water snowpack we have. This is one of the lowest. It's like in the top 5 of how low our water pack is and snowpack is in the Sierra. So it's not going to be an easy year. And definitely we're going to see even more water rationing as we move forward. So use less water wherever you can, continue to shower with a bucket, which I've been doing for a while now. And so I think that's one way that you can look at adding additional water into your lawns. And as you're looking into your spring gardens, definitely consider that as an important feature as trying to reduce your water usage. And then on Tuesday, the FDA and the CDC also blessed a second booster of Pfizer and Moderna for all people ages 50 and older who are at least 4 months after their last shot. And this is, of course, on top of anybody 12 and older that is immunocompromised in some way. And this was pretty swift action by the federal health officials after reports of this new BA.2 subvariant is out there. It's around the world. It's a large portion of the new cases that are happening in the US, although we're not seeing any quick uptick in the number of total COVID cases. But right now it's more than half of the US COVID cases is all the BA.2 variant. So, and from Bay Area standpoint, healthcare providers, pharmacies we're waiting for that approval, and they've already started scheduling those next round of booster shots. So go out and get your booster if you qualify, if you're interested. I know that that's already being available at the healthcare providers that are out there. And then yesterday, California passed an emergency ordinance for COVID-19 evictions. So this was the previous laws that were in place ran out on March 31st. And so, the bill basically extended that eviction moratorium through June 30th, but only for those tenants whose applications for rental assistance have already been submitted, and that had to be done by March 31st. So there was a big push by a lot of nonprofits to make sure that people were applying that were qualified. And the bill really added no additional protections on tenants who hadn't applied and who didn't pay their rent or either refused to apply for rental assistance and were denied assistance based on their income. So tenants who fail to pay their rent that comes due as of April 1st are now, of course, subject to eviction rules from before the pandemic. And the other portion of this legislation that the legislature passed also blocks any new local eviction protection laws for non-payment of rent. So it also blocked some of the local municipalities from adding additional eviction protection laws. So I haven't went to look at all the kind of the ramifications of that, but definitely that was also part of that law. Let's go ahead and get to our weekly COVID numbers. And so COVID around the nation continues to kind of be at a steady state. It's trended downward quite a bit, but now it's kind of steady from week to week for the last few weeks. From a national standpoint, we've now had over 79 million cases, and that's increased about 200,000 in the last week, and that's the same as last week, so same as the week before. Nationally, we've had over 255 million vaccinated with at least one dose, and so that's 81% of those 5 and older with at least one dose, and nationally over 75% of adults are fully vaccinated. So, that's a very positive thing. People are now going back for their boosters. As for deaths, people are still passing away with COVID, but that was only about 5,000 people in the US over the last week. And from a California standpoint, we've now had over 8.4 million positive cases. We've dropped to about 1,900 new cases a day, and that's continuing to trend downward. So it was 2,100 a day last week and 2,900 a day 2 weeks ago. So definitely we're seeing that, steady downward, or kind of leveling out downward trend. The test case positivity is still at about 1.4%. So, that's a good average as far as the last 8 weeks is concerned. California still has people passing away because of COVID. We've now passed 88,000 fatalities, and that's about additional 400 deaths just in the last week. And from a county standpoint, the county, continues to do well. We've reached a cumulative case count of over 309,000. That's up about 1,000 since the last week, over the last week, and that's the same as a week ago. So, definitely we're seeing this steadying as far as case counts are concerned. We've had an additional 16 deaths, so we reached 2,217 deaths with those that related to COVID, and then 94%. Those 18 and older are fully vaccinated in our county, and over 69% of those that are eligible for their booster have already received it. So those are all positive from a county standpoint. And, I continue to advocate on our city's behalf with the county supervisors, county health, definitely, making sure that we are well represented as far as Sunnyvale is concerned. From a testing standpoint, the county pop-up van continues to be in Sunnyvale at the community center on the 1st and 3rd Thursday of the month. So they'll be back here April 7th. And those reservations for getting tested ultimately open up a week ahead of time. So they're already open. If you want to go get tested, you can go to sccfreetest.org and set up an appointment at the community center for April 7th. They'll also, of course, be back on the 21st. And then that sccfreetest.org also shows all the locations around the county where you can go ahead and get tested, whether or not it's a drop-in testing or whether or not it's actually a pre-appointment like the one at the community center. And then, of course, if you want to get your booster shot, what you can do is go to sccfreevax.org and see all the locations around the county where you can either set up an appointment or just do drop-in. And of course, a lot of the pharmacies, CVS, Walgreens, are also giving you those options as far as getting vaccinated, getting tested. You can also sign up to get free tests, take-home tests, all that. Although there's a lot of options for either getting your booster, getting your vaccination, getting your testing. That's one of the good things that the county has been really working on, and happy to be able to advocate to make sure that we have those options locally. Next, I wanted to talk about some upcoming events. So I already talked about it earlier, but on Wednesday, April 20th, starting around 10 a.m. in the morning, there will be an arbor tree planting at Brayley Park. So come join the fund as far as that's concerned. Definitely, I think we planted 10 trees last year, and I think we're going to be doing the same this year, all basically sponsored and donated from our Sunnyvale sister city organization. So thank you for that. And it's good to continue that relationship between Iska Japan and Sunnyvale. Next year will actually be the 10-year anniversary of finalizing that sister city event and relationship. And so hopefully we'll have some good events as far as next year is concerned. And then the weekend of April 23rd and 24th, I know people are working on their spring and summer gardens. Charles Street Gardens, our community garden at Olive and Charles Avenue, or Charles Street, will be having their yearly plant sale, and that'll happen Saturday and Sunday on the 23rd and 24th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So that's always a lot of fun. Definitely finding, going out and buying your tomatoes and peppers, and they have a wide variety of vegetables and succulents that they'll be selling. So come out and join that fun. And then as far as upcoming council meetings, we have several coming up in April. Next Tuesday, April 5th, we'll start on a study session on Caltrain grade separation. And then we'll kick off our main meeting with several special orders of the day, one of which is Fair Housing Month, which is April, Library Week, which is coming up later this month, and Earth Month. So lots to celebrate as we get into spring as far as that's concerned. And then as far as the main meeting is concerned, we'll have several considerations of basically reports coming back on studies that we'd had going. Two studies, one of which is improving the traffic operations at Fremont and Bernardo in 85. And then also looking at acquiring control of the Caltrans traffic signals along El Camino Real. And a lot of this has to do with these intersections are controlled by Caltrans. And so it's having those negotiations, figuring out, what we can do to kind of take more control over them, but not, deal with all the financial repercussions of owning those roads like we have to do in paving all the roads around the city. So trying to make those intersections safer, trying to improve timings, but we'll see how those reports are when we review them on Tuesday. And then on Tuesday, April 26th, we have several things on the agenda, one of which is we'll be starting off with a study session to explore the 2022 general election ballot measure to modify real property transfer tax. So this is looking for basically duplicating what's a lot of the cities around the county have and around the state to say when a property is sold, that the city also has a certain amount of property transfer tax that would come to the city. And it's I think it's what we talked about previously, and what other cities are doing are like doing $1 for every 100,000 or something of that nature, or something along that measure. But so it ultimately, when a property is sold, what it means is an additional few $100s and come to the city, up to $1,000 or something. So we're talking about, $1 million properties, but conceivably it's an additional amount of money that the city can make, especially to kind of look at before the next property tax increase as that property is reevaluated. And then as far as the main meeting is concerned, and ultimately for the property tax stamp transfer tax, it would be conceivably putting something on the ballot for the November election 2022. And then as far as the main meeting is concerned, we're looking at introducing an ordinance on single-use plastics, which I think is, I've been requested for a long time now. It's one of our climate action plan playbook items that we said that we wanted to do. And I think finally we're getting to where that ordinance is. So happy to finally have that on the docket. And then on Thursday, not a Tuesday meeting, but a Thursday, April 28th, that'll be the next Moffett Park specific plan workshop. And so this will be our kind of the standard workshop format with the consultants and staff doing a presentation, the community giving feedback, and then asking questions and giving feedback, and then council actually giving a certain amount of direction as far as that's concerned. But this one is one of the more important ones. This is our land use workshop. So, our last one was on open space and what we're going to do as far as creating additional open space there. Now we're talking about land use. And I think this is going to be one of the critical ones to talk about, what we would like to see and where housing will go, where retail will go, as far as that is finally concerned. Let's go ahead and get to our weekly questions. Let me take a drink of water. I'm getting a little parched today. Several people asked, Nina, Vanessa, others. I was wondering when the new Magical Bridge Playground on Fair Oaks will be open. It looks beautiful. Yeah, so it's getting close to being final. The fences are still up around Fair Oaks Park, and that whole park has been renovated. What I've seen from the outside, it looks really amazing. But the grand opening is scheduled for the end of this month, so Saturday, April 30th. That'll be more information as we get closer to that date, but there should be some sort of ribbon cutting for our Magical Bridge Playground, and then having that park open as we hit spring. And this is lots of new features within the park. It's going to be the first artificial turf park that we have, but lots of positive things as far as Fair Oaks Park is concerned. And we have a long-term plan to renovate all the city parks. And so every year or two we deal with another park, and this is part of Sunnyvale's long-term vision of from a budgetary standpoint, having a 10-year balanced budget and then having a 20-year plan, and making sure that from a city standpoint, we try to make sure that we not just deal with infrastructure, but deal with parks and deal with what people want to see, what public facilities, much like our city hall, need refurbishing after years. Our city hall was 50 years old, and it was time to deal with some of the leaking roofs that we had, or the problems with the heating or the air conditioning, and all those things as we build like a new city hall. So much like that, council many years ago put a plan in place to renovate our parks. And then George asked, do we have an update on the expected finish date for the city center project? And just as I was talking about, the public safety addition will be opening sometime this summer. So that's the addition on the side of public safety building. And then City Hall should be opening sometime in the fall. And so all those look like they're well on track as far as that's concerned. The public safety building has been fully enclosed. They're now working on the interior, so that's going along well. and they're still, wrapping up some of the exterior stuff on the city hall, but they're also, have started some of the interior work. As far as that's concerned, I met with PG&E last week to make sure that as for on multiple projects, but one of which was to make sure that the additional infrastructure required for public safety and for City Hall will be done in time. Grace asked, what were some of the issues you discussed about Sunnyvale when you were in Washington? And so 2 weeks ago, I was at National League of Cities in Washington, D.C., and it's the first time I was in an airplane in more than 2 years. But this is one of the better conferences. It's like, while you're there, you get to meet with a lot of the departments. So, I talked to the Department of Transportation on possible funding for active transportation projects in the city. I also found out that they're funding affordable housing. So looking at how different affordable housing projects could qualify for their requirements. Talking to the Housing and Urban Development Group about getting funding for nonprofits like Sunnyvale Community Services, Downtown Streets Team, and others that do good work within our city, and making sure that funding doesn't drop. Funding for NOVA in our workforce program, which is critical for our county, not just for Sunnyvale, but for our county overall. And then dealing with kind of the bigger issues like sea level rise and people's complaints, talking to the FAA about airplane noise and what can be done as far as that's concerned. And so, talking to federal departments as well as our electeds. So I met with, Senator Padilla and his staff. I met with, Congressman Khanna and his district staff. And so it was good from that standpoint to be there, meet some of their DC personnel, which I only normally email with, and get a better idea of what their priorities are and kind of give them what our needs are from a city standpoint. So it was a good trip overall. And talking about issues that our residents have, from airplane noise to the nuisance ADA lawsuits that are happen to a lot of our businesses. So hopefully we'll see some changes from a federal standpoint, and also more importantly, getting some funding for some of the programs that we'd like to see here in the city. Joe asked, could you comment at all on the past or current discussions regarding moving overhead wiring cables underground? And so definitely from a city standpoint, we require that from large projects. Of course, the state has allowed some developers, housing developers, to basically make concessions that says that undergrounding utilities would actually be too expensive. And so providing that concession, this is one of the things that I constantly fight our state legislatures about, that ultimately some of those problems of allowing the developers to say this would make the project too costly, even though when you start looking at it, it is a health benefit. If they were undergrounded, it's it's aesthetically better, but it's also safer that you don't have issues of those lines falling, or also conceivably being hit by falling trees or something of that nature. But we'll see, and as far as the city, we did identify certain areas that we would like to underground power lines, but it's part of a long unfunded project list the city has, that we have a lot of things that we'd like to do, but don't have the funds to do them. Vicky was wondering how active the neighborhood associations are these days. I know some of what Lakewood Neighborhood Association does, but also the city had other ones that were very active. So yeah, you see a variety of activity from our neighborhood associations. Snail, so that the area basically between 101 and Maud Avenue, and kind of west of Fair Oaks. That's our most active neighborhood association. They meet monthly, in person or via Zoom during COVID. And I think Most of our neighborhood associations meet several times a year, not quarterly, but maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Some of them haven't met in years. Our downtown neighborhood association is where I live, hasn't met for years, and kind of you see some waxing and waning among the different neighborhood associations, depending upon who their members are, what their issues are, and kind of who kind of picks up that banner and make sure that people are talking about their local issues. So yeah, they're definitely used to, and it kind of varies from neighborhood to neighborhood and area to area of the city. Sometimes there are new ones that are appearing, and then sometimes old ones kind of pass, kind of go into disuse for some number of years, and then maybe are restarted. So if you have a neighborhood that you would like to get started, definitely talk to the city. There's a whole program. They have quarterly meetings to talk about what the neighborhood issues are and help people restart that kind of neighborhood associations. Florence asked, where can I help volunteer? So she asked this last week, and I wanted to bring it up again. Our boards and commission recruitment is currently underway for mid-year, and our mid-year recruitment usually has quite a number of people that end up terming out. And so there are a lot more positions available for people that have been there for 8 years, 2 4-year terms on a specific commission. But pretty much every commission that we have, and I'll go through the commissions. The Art Commission has 2 people. The Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission has 3 people, 3 positions open. Board of Building Code Appeals, the Board of Library Trustees, the Heritage Preservation Commission has 2, Housing and Human Services has 3, Parks and Recreation Commission has 1, Personnel Board, Planning Commission has 2, and Sustainability Commission has 2. So pretty much every commission has available spots. If you're interested, applications are due by 4 p.m. on Thursday, April 28th. And an interview would be then scheduled with council on sometime in May 9th or 10th. So lots of opportunities and lots of other opportunities. Sunnyvale Community Services is always looking for volunteers. Our Daily Bread, the Friends of the Sunnyvale Library need help in setting up. The Historical Society needs docents and people to work behind the scenes. So whatever your abilities, there is most likely an organization within the city that you can volunteer at. Let's see. Oh, Andy asked, how many stories in the 2 buildings replacing the old Macy's? So right now, you see the big hole in the ground that is next to Redwood Square. And ultimately that is going to be 2 levels of underground parking. And then above that will be several things. Right along Washington Avenue, it'll be separated into 2 buildings, where Macy's was 1 building kind of across that span. It'll be moved into 2 7-story buildings with Francis that comes from the Caltrain station, continuing on through into a plaza, and then kind of going into that underground parking. But on either side will be 7-story office buildings with retail along the bottom, and 6 stories of office above. And then kind of around Redwood Square, so a big L-shaped building, will be 12 stories of residential and retail. So retail on the bottom, and 11 stories of about almost 500 apartments above, kind of creating a big open space, as well as kind of wrapping that Redwood Square with an L-shaped building. So definitely lots of building that still needs to be done. As far as that block 3, that's one of the biggest blocks that is left to be developed, but it is moving forward, and you see all the dirt being removed for that underground parking right now. So hopefully that moves forward quickly. Melissa asked, how long does it take the city to fix a sidewalk and curb that is lifting up because of a city tree? I've called numerous times to the city, and they just keep pushing it off. It's a hazard to the street. Location is on East Washington. So Melissa, I thank you for those photos, and I did go by there. Ultimately, it's like, if it's a sidewalk issue, city is very quick about coming out, evaluating it, conceivably patching it. When it becomes a gutter issue, and that's what this is, it's the curb and gutter. It's not as high a priority because from a safety standpoint, you're already walking up into the walking either up from the street above the curb and onto the sidewalk, or in this case, or walking down, walking from the sidewalk into the street. And so cracked and kind of lifted curbs, sometimes they cause issues as far as kind of gutter flow and all of that it's like you'll see kind of a raised portion in certain streets because of those underground street roots, or tree roots, as far as that's concerned, kind of buckling of the street. But it does take a while. Those aren't the highest priorities at the end of the day, and it is added to the list. And when the city kind of gets to every summer, we do another set of those. Maybe it'll be this summer, and you can actually request on where it is in that list. But sometimes there are more immediate issues, and definitely sidewalks where people are walking have a lot higher priority in the grand scheme of things. And that's one of the reasons why they immediately patch it. And if it's really bad, then they go out and deal with when they can figure out when to actually replace that sidewalk and make sure that everything is level. But I run 2 to 5 miles every day and hit a lot of different sidewalks in the city. And I know that there are issues around the city, but the biggest issues are patched immediately. And so if you see an issue, what you can do is definitely go to Access Sunnyvale at the top of the city website, sunnyvale.ca.gov, and report any big issue like a sidewalk crack, a hole in the sidewalk that's a tripping hazard, and then ultimately it's added to the list for the city to come back at some future date to kind of do the sidewalk repairs in specific neighborhoods. And they try to do neighborhood by neighborhood so they can hit, those workers can do all the upgrades, do all the improvements in a specific neighborhood all at the same time. Let's see. Grace asked, why is the legislature proposing to give $400 gas rebates to people who don't drive and to people who own electric cars? So now it's mainly for people who own cars, but it is both electric cars and gas cars. But we'll see what the final take is on that from the state legislature standpoint. And then Susan asked, I love the utility box mural project. When do the artists start? So they've been working for about 2 weekends now. There's lots of places downtown, mainly along Sunnyvale Avenue, along Matilda Avenue, that they're replacing those utility boxes along Evelyn. So those are the 3 main streets. I visited several of the artists last weekend and got to talk to them as they were working on their creations, and happy to see that livening up. I heard from a lot of the artists that all they heard were positive comments from hundreds of residents that have walked by when they are doing that work, and they're mainly working on Saturday and Sunday. So go downtown this weekend and you'll see some of those artists working. I know that there'll be the artists at McKinley and Sunnyvale Avenue, as well as McKinley and Matilda Avenue. It'll be working this weekend. But if you go through there, and I'll post about it later today, about some of those locations if you want to go see some of the art being created. Let's see if we have any questions that I can see. Nothing off the top of my head. I don't see any new questions. So thank you for joining me again this week. Let's go ahead and wrap up. COVID continues to cause our community and kind of the entire world to struggle. I want you to know that no matter what the challenges we face, we face them together. And I'm proud of our city and how our residents have responded to COVID so far. I'm thankful to everyone who helps and serves our community in so many ways, whether or not that's, volunteering your time at a nonprofit, or, collecting food, collecting blankets to give to some of the unhoused, or just sharing what you have freely. I run by and see people, putting their fresh picked fruit out for others to enjoy. New issues come up almost every day, but your actions and your attitude really do make a difference. Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together. We'll get through this together. Remember, just be kind, be generous, and we will all get through this. So thanks for listening. Have a wonderful week. Goodbye.